There were 12 judges of Israel during the book of Judges, and in chapter 10 we meet number 6 and 7, Tola and Jair. Now we know relatively little about these judges, and in some ways that's not a bad thing. Evidently they weren't embroiled in controversy, they didn't descend into disgrace, they didn't live lives like Abimelech in the previous chapter, or even like Gideon towards the end of his life. However, when they died, we read the depressing statement, "Again, Israel did evil in the eyes of the Lord." Now listen to what that actually means in this instance. Not only that they served the Baals and the Ashtaroths that we've already met in the book of Judges, but also the gods of Aram, the gods of Sidon, the gods of Moab, the gods of the Ammonites, and the gods of the Philistines. In other words, you could barely move for false gods in Israel at this time. Do you see now why it would have been so much better for the Israelites to see their mission all the way through to completion back in the book of Joshua? How devastating it is that the various tribes never really took hold of their territories. These foreign gods that they let remain have found a way into the hearts of the Israelites. And in fact, it's not hard to imagine why. It's because of the lusts of the flesh. It's because of the desire for a God who can be seen and touched, literally made and then perhaps remade if you get tired of the old appearance of things. It's because of the practices that are permissible under the apparent rule of this so-called Canaanite God. The Baals, of course, were apparently in charge of the weather, which in that day and age was not just a nicety, but an absolute necessity in terms of prosperity. If you want good crops this year, better make sure that you please Baal, the god of weather. Which is why, of course, Elijah calling down a drought in the heart of the land of Baal proves the powerlessness of this pretend god. What about the others? Well, Ashtaroth was apparently the goddess of fertility, and as part of the pagan worship of this god, all sorts of sexual misconduct was permissible. In all likelihood, the Israelites had taken an approach to worship which said that there are many ways to worship the gods, and they accept the practices of many surrounding nations. You see the kind of collection of gods that they've accumulated, blending practices as and when they suit their tastes. The technical word for this is syncretism. It's the merging of different beliefs and practices, actually often contradictory beliefs and practices, to suit your own preferences and desires. This is one of the major reasons why the first commandment is, "You shall have no other gods before me." God is fiercely jealous in an appropriate sense for the love of his people, the exclusive relationship of his people. It's why this behavior here is seen by God as his people prostituting themselves out to others. They've given their allegiance to him, and yet, depending on their mood or their self-described need, they run after foreign gods as well. This is unfaithfulness. It's spiritual adultery. Now, we've got to say at this point, many people are tempted towards syncretism too. How many people claim the name of Christ, but also worship at the altar of money, sex, power, popularity? How many of us say with our lips that we belong to the one true God, yet we say with our lives that we belong to 100 other gods, which are seen by our society as being impressive or important, but are shown in the scriptures to be worthless? We are not all that unlike these ancient Israelites, Once again, in keeping with the sin cycle in the book of Judges, hard times come upon them and they again cry out to God. But listen to the Lord's reply in verse 11. "When the Egyptians, the Amorites, the Ammonites, the Philistines, the Sidonians, the Amalekites, and the Maonites oppressed you, and you cried to me for help, did I not save you from their hands? But you have forsaken me and served other gods, so I will no longer save you. Go and cry out to the gods you have chosen. Let them save you when you are in trouble." Which is a powerful point, isn't it? The gods of these surrounding nations were not sufficiently powerful to keep you, the Israelites, from blasting into their territories and taking out their cities, annihilating their armies, and subduing their land. You've seen the power of God throughout the Bible. You know how he provides. You know that he is greater than these so-called gods of the surrounding nations, and yet you still desert him for them? What an insult, hey? Or a slap in the face for God. The people respond by saying, "We have sinned. Do with us whatever you think best, but please rescue us now." And then listen to this, verse 16. Their lives at last begin to match up with their lips. Verse 16, then they got rid of the foreign gods among them and served the Lord, and he could bear Israel's misery no longer. It's one thing to say, I honor Jesus, I serve Jesus, I live for Jesus, but it's meaningless if, at the same time, your life is filled with and fueled by the worship of these foreign false gods. If you are genuinely turning to God, what does it mean then? That you are turning from sin. That's what repentance is. It's got to be both of those things. Turning from sin and turning to God. One half of that equation is not enough. May God help us to leave behind the idols of this world, to rid ourselves of them, to delight ourselves in the Lord and serve our God only, to show with our lives that we mean what we say with our lips when we claim to live for His glory.